Hello, good morning. Trying something a little new as we all are, and I'm trying to do a screen introduction to the screencast record introduction to this module through a screencast recording. So bear with me. It's a little bit weird not to present in front of faces and instead to talk to a computer screen. But I thought I would try something new as you all as teachers are and be a little uncomfortable, and I appreciate your indulgence in me. Um, so I miss you all, appreciate you all. We're going to talk a little bit this morning about facilitating an accessible classroom. I'll talk about more about what that will look like in just a second. Before we do that, I just want to take a minute to express my gratitude for each and every one of you right now. Teachers, you've done an amazing job collaborating and showing care and concern for all of the students. It's been really inspiring to me to see all the different ways that teachers are engaging with students and with each other to support each other and to support the team. I feel very proud to be a part of the SEED team, and I'm very appreciative of the support of the Student Life team to help make this experience as best as it can be. I have a number of friends that are also in education, and in comparing notes, I just feel very good about our team and what we're doing for the work for our students. I'm also very grateful for this time to just step back for a couple of days and reflect and learn and refine our practices so that we can grow stronger. And in some of our conversations that I've had with different team members, that I think that there are some lessons that we're learning right now that will definitely have a short-term impact, but I'm also excited to see the long-term impact when we get back to school and what this experience has meant for us as educators and for our children as students. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about accessible classrooms, and I'm going to use this visual that I'm sure many, if not all of you, have seen before and remind us and ground us in this idea behind equality and equity, and that what is equal for children and for people is not always fair, and what is fair is not always equal. I think that we have not play is the wrong word. I think that we have grasped this concept in different ways in the classroom and in the school where we've had successes and we've definitely had challenges. And now that we're in a virtual space, the playing field is different. And the way that we operated, a month ago was different than how we're operating right now. And so we're seeing that come out in a couple of different ways. I think it's been really interesting to me to see some of our students who have struggled in a traditional classroom really shine and take responsibility and show a lot of grit and determination and strength. And that has been amazing to see how, in traditional normal operating businesses needed a lot of support and are thriving right now. And then I think that we're also surprised by some students that have been successful are having a little bit more struggles and for different reasons. And I don't think that we're at all surprised by that, but I think that it does give us a minute to pause and consider what can we do to support them and how do we move forward from here. Um, Before we talk about some of those challenges, I do want to just take a minute to remind ourselves about opportunities. So think for a minute about opportunities and what opportunities does a virtual classroom give for students? I think first and foremost, a virtual classroom provides a lot of flexibility for students. They have a lot of ability to make different choices about when, where, and how they do their work that isn't necessarily available for them as students. We are seeing students make really positive choices. We're seeing students make not so positive choices, and we're seeing students make choices in ways that we maybe didn't see, a month ago. Another opportunity is just time. It's great that students have additional time, as much time as they need to grasp a concept, to complete an assignment. They're not working towards the end of the bell or working until tomorrow. And I think that our district and our school is doing a great job of supporting students and allowing additional time and extending time for students to complete the work. There's also this great opportunity for students to have opportunities to replay videos, to pause videos as they're going. And for some of some of the programs that we're using, like Khan Academy, students have multiple opportunities to practice the same concept until they master it. And so there's this great opportunity to redo and retake assignments. I think that it's also another additional opportunities for some of our students. They may work best when they're by themselves and have a place where they can separate themselves from social pressures that may exist in a normal school setting. Also, there's reduced pressure for them to think and work, and they don't have to rush to answer a question correctly, or they may not, in a traditional classroom, they may be nervous to answer a question for fear of getting it wrong or how their peers might respond. So, they don't have that same amount of peer pressure. And then I think that a huge opportunity is that students are, we see teenagers and adults too, are sometimes more comfortable in front of a screen and can be themselves more in front of a screen than whether it's a computer screen or a phone screen. They're more comfortable being themselves and who they are when they're in front of a screen than in a classroom or in a school setting. And our classrooms, in essence, are it's a social media network. And so I think it's great that we can leverage that interest and passion that our teenagers have in a way that supports their education as well. As teachers, it's your master craft to consider what is the content that you're teaching and then how you're going to teach it. What we teach and how we teach through the presentation. And so as you do your lesson planning and your execution and your reflection, those are the two main things that you're thinking about, among others, but two big things of the planning cycle that go along with that. And the idea, and I guess I should have put a reference in here around universal design for learning, but I want you to think about also accessibility. If you're not already in this practice of accessibility and how students engage in the presentation and whether students are able to access the content that is being taught and what supports and scaffolds you put in that place. Before I go too deep into that idea and concept, I want to define accessibility. And so there's 3 definitions that come up from my handy dandy, use of Google, because that's available to me. The quality of being able to be reached or entered, the quality of being easy to obtain or use, the quality of being easily understood or appreciated. So when we think about the idea of accessibility to the content in the presentation of your lessons, you want to keep all 3 of these definitions in mind. Are students able to reach it or enter it? Is your content easy to obtain or use, and is it easily understood or appreciated? It is not at all saying dumb it down. We're just considering how can we make this work as accessible, how can we make this to the greatest extent possible to be accessed? And so we look at that from the lens of accessibility. How can do students have the necessary language, vocabulary, literacy skills to access the content that you're teaching? And then do they have the accessibility given the way that it's presented and to engage in the activities, the lesson presentation, and the assignments? When we think about accessibility, then that comes in mind, what are the barriers to the access? Take a minute to think about some barriers that may occur in a typical classroom and in a virtual classroom. When we first think about barriers to accessing a classroom or just daily living environment, I think that we often think about accessibility in terms of physical disabilities and physical impairments. There are wheelchair ramps where you go on the sidewalks, and in entering buildings, there's Braille writing on the elevators and on the ATM machines. We have sign language interpreters for any large public meetings. But we have to think about disabilities in a much more broadly expanded definition, because the reality is that the students in our building often do not have the physical disabilities or impairments, and instead that I like to call a hidden disability. Students with disabilities at SEED have processing disabilities, memory disabilities, other types of learning disabilities, attention and focus disabilities, and that all can create a barrier to them accessing both the content and the presentation of your lessons. And then as well as I do that our students at the SEED school have different levels of literacy, and that can create a barrier if our students do not have the reading or writing abilities to fully access the grade level content and curriculum. And then finally, another barrier that comes to mind for me, at least, is the barrier. It can sometimes be a barrier for students, the social and peer influence. Sometimes students may be distracting, or there may be pressure from their peers that may impact their ability to access the classroom. In a virtual world, there's a lot of other barriers that come into play. Some of our students do not have laptops, and so they're trying to access their content through cell phones or tablets. And even though we distributed many laptops are now starting to go broken, or students are sharing a laptop between multiple siblings or even with their parents. And so they don't always have the access to the laptop at all times when they want to do their work. Even if they do have a working laptop, the laptop may not work in the way that it's expected. It may break, the wireless might be slow, the program or the computer may be slow. I have had a number of different barriers as I've been preparing this presentation just to make some of these slides and some of the recordings. There's been a lot of barriers that I've encountered that have made this frustrating for me and have made me question why I'm doing it this way. And then even in this perfect world where students have working laptops, working wireless, what's becoming very apparent to me is that our students have different levels of digital literacy. And so especially with our younger students, they don't know how to type. They don't know how to use Google Docs. They don't know how to navigate between different browsers. And that has definitely created some barriers to access to their classroom. And then a very, very real barrier is the environment in which the students are trying to live and survive and access their classrooms. Our students, by nature of our program at the Seed School of Miami, our students are coming from situations where either they themselves or their parents have looked for a 24-hour boarding program so that they can focus on school when they need to focus on school. And for many of our students, they are in an environment that may not be the most supportive for their academic learning. And that can create a huge barrier in a lot of different ways. And we're not even privy to all of the things that's going on for the students. And for many of us, adults and children, all of these changes and uncertainties around this shutdown has caused worry and anxiety and fear about COVID-19 and our lives and how our lives have changed so much. And so all of that, we have students and families who have been personally impacted by COVID-19. We have staff members who've been impacted by COVID-19, and all of that is causing a barrier as well for us to fully engage in, no matter what the best intentions, to fully engage in the work that we're doing and students are doing on a day-to-day basis. I think another thing to add too is just we're trying a lot of new things, and like as frustrating as I mentioned a minute ago, the technology that I had, and I'm trying this new thing, and it's a little bit frustrating sometimes to get back onto the horse when you've had some failures or things haven't gone the way that you've expected. And so we have to keep that in mind, is that our students' emotional state is very different for all the different factors that are at play. And so with that, we may have some behind the screen of that laptop. A student may be losing it or maybe having a very difficult time accessing the classroom. And because they're within a computer screen, we can't read those signs all the time, and we don't know how, we can't always intervene in the way that we can intervene and support them through it when they are physically with us. Okay, sorry, right in the middle of me talking about worry and anxiety about this time and the impact, I learned that this app that I'm using limits me to 15 minutes, which is my gentle reminder that I need to be more succinct. So I'm going to add another piece to the worry and anxiety is that we're all trying new things, and when we try new things, it can sometimes be a little bit nerve-wracking. And so that can also have a big barrier to the access. And then there's just this frustration level. And I think that I've seen students reach their frustration level. I've also seen staff members, and I myself have reached my frustration level. And so it can be hard to come back and get back on the horse when we have lost it, especially when we have to do something we're uncomfortable with. And so there's, just a lot of barriers. And all those barriers can pile up. And so when we go back to this visual, I'm going to add on reality. And this virtual world can make the reality seem even more the inequity, inequality into the world of access to the game. I think that I'm going to pause for just a minute and make a point just to say that I'm using these words barrier, not to mean that it's something that's insurmountable or ultimately prohibitive. I'm using the term barrier as a word to just mean that there are circumstances where our team and the teams just need to pause and consider and think things through and think strategically about how we can make this virtual world in our virtual classrooms as accessible as possible. It's also worth noting that there may be multiple barriers at play with students, and so we need to consider which barriers we could reduce in a lesson in order to make the course more accessible for the students. I don't remember what I was going to say with that slide, except for just consider all of these barriers that our students are facing. And just remember and keep in mind that this is not business as usual. And so things that we did over the course of the year, we might not be doing now, or we may be trying different things. And there may be also that we might be doing things for a student that is not the same from student to student. And some students may have alternate lessons, or they may have differentiated lessons. And that's okay, because this is not business as usual, and we're just doing the best that we can to get through this time. So we go back to this idea of accessibility, and I want us to think about making our classrooms accessible and give you some thoughts and some ideas and some suggestions to make your classroom accessible, not only for students that have IEPs or 504s or who are English learners, but also for our students who are struggling at this time and maybe struggling for different reasons, so that they can all access the curriculum. And I think that it's also worth noting that we may want to think about how our students who are thriving in this environment can access the content and the presentation in a way that allows them to continue to accelerate and thrive in this world. And so this module this morning, the next two activities that you're going to do are read two different articles. One is around universal design for learning and designing accessible classrooms through universal design for learning. And another one is just best practices they're both from a website called understood.org. My ask is that you read the articles and comment at least one time, and that will allow us to be interactive and collaborate with one another when we're not physically in the room. And then after the readings, there is a further exploration page that really is up to you to either explore something further that was cited in one of the readings that we're doing, or one of the suggestions that I have, but also take that time for yourself. If you know that there's something that you saw yesterday that you think would help you have a more accessible classroom, take that time. And then we'll finish up with, I like to call slide 4. Part 4 is just what is the bottom line and where do we go from here, and how can my team, the ESC team, help support you in making your classroom more accessible. So thank you for indulging me in me trying something new and framing the day. I hope you enjoy the modules, and I would love the feedback if you're willing to give it. Thank you all.